how do you manage to be patient in listening? Because I'm not patient.
Well, I think that's the very first thing that we should address. If you think that you know that you're not patient, you need to change that, because there's absolutely no point in asking a question of one of our prospects or prospective clients and then us not taking the time to listen intently to their answer. Because once we've listened to exactly what they've said, it then gives us a very good direction in which to go with the next question and the rest of the conversation. So let's look at that very first point. Let's be patient. Let's understand that what we want to do is to have a really good conversation about the prospect's business, perhaps their business world, how it might be affecting them, and to ask questions all about what they might be suffering from. And once we've asked some really good questions and we've got the answers, we can then move on with that conversation, and we can find out if it's going to be a constructive conversation that's going to allow us to do business with this prospect down the line, or we're wasting the prospect's time, or indeed our own time. So patience is a virtue, and it's a very important part of that. Be patient.
Right. I feel like if I'm listening too much, okay, I feel like I'm losing the tempo, because I'm in there. I've got this momentum of trying to get something to them, right? I want to show them. So I have to, say something very quickly, and I just feel nervous if there's quietness, So how do you handle that? You know what I mean?
That's a really good point, and you are definitely not the only person to suffer with that, because it's very difficult to sit in silence through something without saying something. It's almost, if you've been so used to talking over things, through things, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. But that's where the gold comes from and listening. And then we can move on from there. So the easiest thing to do is to ask a question, listen to the answer, listen really carefully to the answer, because whilst that answer is coming through to you, whilst the prospect is opening up to you, you're then understanding perhaps the next question. It's a natural question to ask in the sequence. So maybe if you consider, let's think of an example. You're at a party where there are a number of people and you don't know them. So if you just start talking to somebody that you've just met, you'll talk, oh, what is it that you do? Whereabouts do you live? And before you know it, you're in a conversation with these people. You're not trying to talk over them or talk through them or talk around them. What you're doing is you're actually asking questions because you're interested in perhaps their lives. They will give you answers, and that will then develop another question that you'll understand to perhaps ask them in that logical sequence. So it's a very similar thing. But I think what happens is that a lot of salespeople feel that what they need to do is just go, and that's really not the way to do it. Right. Top tip, as salespeople, we speak maybe 30 to 50%, and as the prospects, ideally what we want is for them to speak between 50 and 70%. So it's all about the prospects, not about us. It's all about them. And once we've got that understanding in our mindset and we've switched that switch on, it becomes a lot easier to be able to do.
That's very interesting, that, because I feel like, to me anyway, Nick, it sounds like it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because, when you ask the questions, number one, I start to feel like I'm not frank, right? I'm asking questions as if I'm caring about them, but really I'm thinking about how can I sell to this person, the concept I've been going through before in my previous training, it's all about getting their money into my pockets. You know what that means, right? It's about that, really. So if I ask questions, right, my brain is not really, I'm trying to listen, but I'm trying to get this next point up. So I'm not really fully attentive, if you see what I mean. So how do you actually persuade yourself to hang on, and just listen? This is very hard psychology for me.
Well, let me ask you a direct question, Rosalind, if I may.
Okay.
The tactics that you've used, that you've just described, how well have they worked for you?
Okay. What do you want to know? The rate of closing, or how do you measure well anyway?
Well, I think you know the answer to that. Do you think that you could do a lot better, or do you think that what you're doing at the moment is fantastic?
Okay, surely I would say to myself, like, I can do better, because every time I meet people, right, I have a feeling that I'm not good enough. I'm not saying the right thing in the right time. I haven't, what do you call it? In Malaysia, they call it hot button. I haven't really touched the hot button. So I don't know if that term is in the UK or not, but in Malaysia, hot button means like if I press a correct hot button, that guy is actually going to respond to my, sales.
Okay, so every sort of action, there's a reaction. I understand what you say. So I'll ask you another question, and obviously the viewers of this aren't going to know the conversations you and I have had, but between the conversations you and I have had off screen, off podcast, how much have I spoken compared to how much have you spoken?
Yeah,
First question.
that's interesting. That's going to be embarrassing, but I dare say you are actually probably talking about 20% of the time, and 80% is just me babbling like you said. That sounds like me. Right.
Now, here's the second question then. In terms of the questions I've asked you and maybe the 20% that I've been talking, what has been perhaps the return or the response from you? What kind of information have you given me that I've then asked more questions about you of that's been helpful?
That's very interesting, because I found I didn't really answer your questions the first time, if you recall that. You asked me very precise, more like incision question, more like, precisely cutting it, and I still jumbled my answers, and I just mix everything up. I'm so confused, but your question is very probing, very, you keep asking until you got the real problems in my head. You really find the problems after a few questions. But if you recall, the first 2-3 times you asked me, I didn't really fully answer the questions because I just, so much thinking in my brain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I asked you that question because it's a very common thing that happens. As salespeople, generally, we're taught to talk to the prospect or to the prospective client. We're taught to talk and talk and pitch until we get that button, at which point the prospect says, I'm really interested, or I'm not interested. It's not something I'm looking for. But the art of selling has changed hugely. And it's really all about the person, the buyer that we're speaking to, or the prospect. It's about what they're going to tell us that will determine whether we can actually help them with the service or the product that we're selling that will help our prospect, or we can't. And at that point, we can say to the prospect, look, I'm grateful for your time, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, but we can't help you. So I'll leave it there with you and thank you. And perhaps you never know if our paths may cross again in the future. People don't do that in selling often, because what they want to do is to push for the prospect to say yes, 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 yes. That's not the way to do it, because all you're doing is you're pushing. And if you push somebody, they withdraw and they go further back. So what we do is we get the prospect to speak about themselves, we get the prospect to speak about their business world, and we get the prospect to speak about some of the issues or the problems that they may be facing in their current world. And we take genuine interest in what they have to say, because that will then lead us to understand that we can help them or we can't help them. There's a lot of psychology, you're absolutely right, involved in.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say that. That's very interesting, because it sounds like you are, you've got this contrarian approach to salesmanship, or saleswomanship. Like when we look at, previous successful salesmen like Zig Ziglar, he's written a book about how to close. Thick book, really like, a Bible of sales, really. But he's got this sales technique which you can adopt. It's very much like scripting, It's got closing technique number 1, closing technique until probably 100 techniques in there. But we're so used to that. How do you change your mindset now?
Yeah, but we're talking there about Zig's style of closing. And when do we use a close? The question, when do we use a close, should come back with the answer, when the prospect is ready to be closed. But there's a lot of time before that point, from the very first moment we speak to the prospect to the point that they're ready to be closed. Are they going to want to speak to us? Are they bothered with what we've got? Are they looking for our services or our products? Are they interested? Do they have a problem we can fix? Do they like us? Do they trust us? All of these things are huge, big parts of the sales process. And the close is probably the very last one. So we're only going to close people that are ready to be closed. So you can take Zig's book at the moment and you can put it on the side, because the question that we need to address is, what about all of the lead up to the close? That's the important thing.
Very true. Very true. Okay. So it requires some kind of discipline then, isn't it? It requires some kind of practice. Is this what you preach?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, when we first learn a new language, we don't really understand at all how it works or how it's constructed, or the sort of the basis of putting one word over another word to create or structure a sentence. Selling is a language in its own right. So what we do is we learn how to do that in a particular process. As salespeople, typically what we do is we get very attached to the outcome. So what I mean by that is that typically we'll pick up the phone and we'll call somebody on a cold call, or we'll send somebody some information by perhaps a WhatsApp or an email, or whatever engagement we may have or already had with that prospect. But the fact is that if we don't put in place a particular process, it's just haphazard. And all we're trying to do is to talk, throw pitch until they go, yes, I'm interested. But the vast majority of times, if we're honest with ourselves, those prospects, probably 9 out of 10 will say, it's wrong time, I'm not interested. Or they won't even give you that information. They'll just put the phone down or not even respond to you. What we want to do is to actually engage with a prospect. And that means by asking questions. So as I've done with you before, I've asked you all about your business and what you're interested in and what matters to you, some of the problems that you've had, some of the issues that you face. And through questioning, you've given me some specific things that hopefully I've been able to shed some light upon. And it's the same thing with any prospect that we speak to.
That's very interesting. I like the saying that you said just now. Selling is a language on its own. That's I've never heard of that before. So that's fantastic. Yes, it's true, isn't it? I mean, it's got to be something, a skill that you have to, what do you call it? You have to master that skill. It seems to be like it's not a script. It's like a practicing thing, isn't it? It's like you have to keep talking in order for you to understand the language, isn't it? You have to have
the whole process of selling is a load of different parts put together to create a whole sentence. All the words put in place in the right order to make a sentence that makes sense. And that's selling. And one of those big important words is, of course, listening. So that's the sort of topic for today, about specifically listening to people. Because if we ask the right questions and we listen intently to the answers, we will get some incredible information from the prospects that we can then use to ask them other questions to identify precisely where they're suffering or having issues with, that we can then provide a fix for. And if we understand that we can do that, and the prospect knows that we can do that, and they admit it too, because we've listened to what they've said to us, they're quite often going to be saying, you know, Rosalind, that's brilliant. That's exactly what I need. How do I get this? They will buy from you. You don't need to push or to sell to them. Now, have you ever experienced that?
I would say very rare. I don't know. I think probably 5%, 3% over time.
So if I could make that 80+% for you, do you think that would be something that you might be interested in learning about?
Yeah, that would be great. But you see, I'm worried about one thing. You know, if I'm practicing listening, I'm worried about this customer is going to run away, you know, and if I keep doing it, I'll probably get few more customers, you know. I thought I could just use a fishnet, you know what I'm saying? And just,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So I'm worried if I use that technique as if I'm using this fishing rod. So how can I cope with that?
Well, okay, so let's use fishing as the analogy here. If you've ever been involved with fishing,
I haven't been fishing, but anyway.
Look, as a child, you probably have your father teach you that you get a piece of
that's right,
you tie a worm and you drop it in the water, and you'll sit there for hours. And you might sit there with this worm in the water for hours because you don't even know.
I don't have that vision, you see.
This is it. So if you don't know there's any fish in that pond, why would you put a worm on a string on the end of a piece of wood? Why would you drop it in front of something that's not there? Well, you wouldn't, would you? So what you're asking is, how do we need to find out, what do we need to find out first? Well, first of all, we need to find out that there are fish in that pond.
Yes.
Secondly, we need to understand what kind of bait they're interested in eating. They might not like worms. They might like crickets or geckos or something completely different. We don't know. And the third thing at that point is we need to understand when or if it's something that they would be interested in, if they were. Yeah. So there's a number of things that we need to identify before we even put that worm in the water. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time, aren't we?
Interesting.
So this is why what we have to do is to create a process which we follow to the letter to understand that once we follow that process, we will get we'll get the right fish time and time and time and time again.
Yeah, so I like the word process. I like that. It seems like you have got a system which we go through in order for you to provide a solution to them. That's very interesting. Okay, so Labo, by the way, if you've got a question, I have got a question prepared for Nick today. Give him a tough question. Come on.
I just want to ask Nick. Let's say we already approached 10 people. How do we know that from the 10, and how we know that actually there are only 2% actually interested with our product? Let's say if we talk to 10, is a tough. Let's say if a tough for us because we explain the whole process, also the whole marketing. So let's say what are the signs the people actually not interested with our product or our service?
Okay, well, I think, Labo, the first thing that we need to identify is who the ideal client profile is likely to be. So let's just use an example here. Say I go out into the streets of KL and I speak to 100 people, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to sell them, let's say, some glasses, some spectacles. Now, I'll speak to 100 random people, and maybe out of those 100 people, only 10 of them actually wear glasses. But I could have found that out first by identifying which type of people I should speak to. So instead of getting 100 people, but 90 of them don't wear glasses, what I could have done is to have identified 100 people who all wore glasses. So that immediately gives me a far better chance, doesn't it? Because what I'm trying to sell to these people are glasses. And then what I need to identify is whether they have bad eyesight, whether it's short-sighted or long-sighted, whether they have problems with their eyes, whether they're colorblind, lots of different things. And I can be more and more specific if I do my research more and more carefully. So that the short answer to the question is, if we speak to 10 random people, hoping that we'll sell to two of them, it's always going to be a random thing. So we need to be specific. Identify 10 potential people that are likely to use our products or our services, and then we have a far better chance of selling them what we're looking to sell them, don't we? I hope that helps.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, okay, Nick, before we end our conversation, I have a question like, probably this is going to be for next session anyway. It seems like you're saying we have to have a proper pond. We have to have proper target market. It seems like we have to use some kind of marketing strategy as well. So is that true, or just sales?
I don't think a marketing strategy is the most important thing. What I understand that we should really do for ourselves is to identify the likelihood of a certain market of people who would buy our products or services. So what we need to do is to look at, we know the sort of the demographic, the age group, whether it's male or female, whether they're business people, whether they need to use certain things in their business, whether lots and lots of different things. So if we've got a particular product like the glasses, we identify people who wear glasses, people who have eye issues, and we will speak to that market only, because people without glasses don't need our glasses. It's just a waste of effort, isn't it? So it can be the same for anything that we're looking at. Depending on what our service or our product is, identify the likelihood of our market and then target them directly. So we'll call that, if you like, our client profile. And our ideal client profile, or ICP, are those people who are likely to buy our product or our service.
Wow, this is deep. Ideal client profile. That's very interesting. So I think we have asked you a lot of questions today, Nick. I really appreciate your time. Before we end, I hope the viewers can see how Nick is solving our problems. Our company is dealing with socialpreneur activities, and we are stuck at finding more clients, more customers coming to our websites, coming purchase from us. So we engaged Nick to help out with all these problems that we face. Apparently, he's a master at selling. So I really appreciate your time, Nick, today, and I hope we can meet up again with more questions next time. And I thank you all for viewing our session today. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nick and Labo. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Labo. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.